Thank you, Jane. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for being here. Capella Metals is a new company exploring for copper and uranium at Mount Isa. We're excited to bring Capella to the market now with the tailwinds behind copper and uranium. We are targeting an early April listing, raising $7 million with Discovery Capital Partners. In the last 9 months, we've been busy. We have acquired a 2,000 square kilometre tenement package at Mount Isa, right in the middle of the Mount Isa region. And Mount Isa is host to 4 of the world's 10 biggest base metal deposits. And 2 of those are on Glencore's tenement right next door. And we have the same major structures which control the location of the Mount Isa ore bodies extending northwards onto our ground. We're surrounded by other copper producers and explorers in the region, and we have high-grade copper-gold mines. We have historical drill hits up to 24 metres at 5% copper, and these deposits are identical to what the Carnabys and the Hammers and the Coopers have been drilling busily for the last 2 to 3 years and getting great results. So I know the market caps of the Carnabys and Hammers and others have come back a bit in the last 12 months, but I think even now with their market caps at $30 million, $50 million, $100 million, that compares really well to our EV at listing is going to be $3.8 million. So that really shows where I think we'll be heading as we do the work and the exploration story unfolds. What sets us apart from the other copper explorers at Mount Isa is we also have the uranium assets. Mount Isa has been explored for uranium for since the 1950s, since the original uranium boom. We're right next door to Paladin's Valhalla project, which is 150 million pounds of uranium in the ground, and it's the 3rd largest uranium project in Australia after Olympic Dam and Jabiluka. We have dozens of prospects on our ground. We have high-grade rock chips up to 2.86%, a modest initial resource, and walk-up drilling targets. So we have the high-grade copper-gold, we have the uranium assets, and I think the thing that really sets us apart from others is that we have the potential to make giant discoveries in this part of the world at Mount Isa. So the question I ask is, where are all the other Mount Isas? Mount Isa is by far the biggest one in the region up here, and after that there are a bunch of large ones and medium and small copper deposits. So the answer, I think, is that there will be a Mount Isa 2.0 out there, but it's sitting where other people haven't looked before, or they haven't looked very hard before. So this patch of ground right next to Mount Isa's mines, it has been prospected in the past with really brilliant mapping back in the day and geochemical sampling, but only 25 odd drill holes for copper over the entire 2,000 square kilometres. And I think the reason for that is partly because for decades they had the wrong geological model, where they thought that the copper was eroding from a source up on the land and it deposited in the particular shale, in the Urquhart shale, and if you didn't have the Urquhart shale on your patch of ground, then you didn't have a copper mine. We do have the Urquhart shale on our tenements. We have a bunch of juicy reactive rock types on our tenements, but the important thing is that we have those regional scale structures which control the location of the fluids. And as soon as those copper fluids hit any kind of juicy reactive rock, they're going to form a copper deposit. And a couple of examples would be the Lumwana deposit in Zambia, where I worked for several years. That was sitting in the basement rocks. And recently the Kamoa discovery by Ivanhoe in DRC was only discovered in 2009 because it was sitting up there in a part of the stratigraphy which wasn't supposed to be prospective. So we have those major regional scale structures running onto our ground and prospective host rocks, and we have 2 key large-scale discovery targets, which I'll tell you about shortly. But firstly, we have the key ingredients for success. Firstly, we've got the area selection at Mount Isa. It's one of the greatest places on the planet to be exploring for copper. And secondly, we have the tailwinds behind copper and uranium, which will support what we're doing, and it means that the shareholders should be rewarded as the exploration story unfolds through 2024. And thirdly, we have an expert team in place with past discoveries under our belt. The independent expert is Dr. Andy Wild, who's done the IGR for our prospectus. He worked for Paladin and Deep Yellow for 10 years in Mount Isa in chief geo roles on the same ground that we have. Our geophysical consultant is Barry Bourne, and he's also worked in the Mount Isa region for several years at Century, and he went on to head Barrick's geophysical department worldwide. A little bit about myself. I'm a geologist by trade, and more recently I've been working in business development roles, doing the joint ventures and the M&A. But as a junior geo working at Mount Isa, when it was still called Mount Isa Mines, we were working on a big rejig of the copper resource because they only had reserves out to 2010 at the time. And they're still mining. They say they're going to shut in 2026, but I'm not sure that they will. So my task was to validate 70 years of historical drilling data at Mount Isa. And that really instilled in me a appreciation for historical data. And I really like finding the gems in historical data sets. There's crucial bits of information that can lead to a discovery. So stepping forward a few years, I found myself as head of mine site exploration for Equinox Minerals in Zambia, where Equinox discovered a whole new ore body sitting right under the noses of previous explorers. The deposit had been known about for 50 years, but we were building the mine. It was already pretty big. And we found a whole new ore body. The previous explorers had actually found the edges of the deposit. They drilled some low-grade copper with the right minerals, but it wasn't recognised as being the ore horizon. And there was also an error where they applied the feet to metres conversion by mistake. So we had in the database a 200-metre deep hole with a whiff of copper, and it was actually a 600-metre deep hole, and it was on the right plane for the ore body to continue in that direction. But they just drilled in the wrong spot. So we applied IP geophysics to work out where the sulfide zone was heading, and I think if the previous explorers had have drilled a few hundred metres away, they would have pinged it, and that's exactly what we drilled. We drilled 127 metres at 0.8% copper, and that led to a massive drill out at Lumwana. I think it was probably the biggest drill out on the planet for a couple of years, with 20 diamond rigs going between 2011 and 2013. And I think that played a little part in Barrick's takeover of Equinox. So bringing that back to Capella Metals and the two key large-scale discovery targets that we have. The first one is a bullseye magnetic anomaly. It's clearly visible in the regional data sets, sitting right next to a major regional scale structure. There's historical workings on top of the magnetic anomaly, and MIM's stream sediment sampling from the 1960s defined an extensive anomaly over 6 Ks by 6 Ks at the 100 ppm cutoff, right next to this geophysical anomaly. Now, I think that didn't really light the world on fire for MIM. When back in the 60s, they're looking for 3% copper sticking out of the ground. But for us, when you put all of that together, we have extensive geochem anomalies and a bullseye magnetic anomaly that's just screaming to be drilled. So we're going to apply detailed magnetics and gravity survey to map the geology and even map mineralization to define drilling targets. The second large-scale discovery target is called Carlton Hills. We have the major regional structures. We have those juicy shale rocks, which are reactive rocks. We have historical workings, high-grade rock chips, extensive copper and zinc in the soils. There has been about a dozen holes drilled there with anomalous copper, 40-odd metres at 2.2% copper. So it looks like we have a large copper mineralised system there, IOCG type or Ernest Henry type or a Mount Isa style copper system. So again, we're going to apply ultra-detailed magnetics and gravity to define drilling targets there. So to wrap it up, we have great area selection at Mount Isa. No better place to be exploring for copper. We have supportive markets for copper and uranium to support what we're doing, so investors should be rewarded as the exploration story unfolds through 2024. And we have an expert team in place with discovery success under our belt. So come and have a chat. I've got some copies of our presentation here. I've got some cards. I'm happy to get you a copy of the prospectus, which is out in a few weeks. Thank you very much.